A question that I've thought for a very long time is, what is a FNAF fan game that is so divided in the FNAF community? The reason why I bring this question up is because it's usually pretty easy to understand people's perspectives on a lot of FNAF fan games and why they always feel the way they do. Whether they be going about gameplay, story, visuals, or cast of characters, all that sweet jazz, the argument still stands and everyone would usually unanimously agree, with barely any hot takes along the way. However, there are a handful of FNAF fan games out there that are for some reason very divided and controversial, that is constantly talked about with no solid agreements whatsoever, and one of the FNAF fan game in particular that is definitely falling into that category is Juniors. But what makes Juniors so divided amongst the FNAF community? Well, let's find out. But before we can answer that question, it's best if we take a deep dive into this fan game, then summarizing my personal thoughts about it as a whole so that I can answer the big question I asked early in this video towards the end. Before going into the game though, we actually get a quick tutorial for what the main night sections are actually going to look like. Instead of the usual route where the animatronics try to reach out to you and you need to use all of your sacrifices and materials that are given to you during the office segments, this game takes a ghost hunting type route. Here are the tutorials that when possessing an animatronic, the ghost can either make the camera lens to flicker, have handprints be labeled on the camera lens, and tells us to mark the haunted animatronic that the ghost is currently possessing on the laptop. After reading the tutorial, you'll get a quick illustration for how the mechanic actually works. As the three of the Freddy gang and their floating heads, which is kind of funny, you click on Bonnie who's doing the flickering, and you'll also get a quick reminder that you should always check your stability level from the animatronics from time to time, because if one of them reaches too low, quickly call them into the conveyor belt and upgrade their new stability level so that way it could be reached to 100 again. Now, after going through the whole tutorial though, we're still not done yet. This game will actually begin by introducing us a cutscene of our main character suddenly being lost until he looks around and sees a figure of a bear standing there. Now, I'll be more brief with these cutscenes by the time we get through the game's story and my overall thoughts about it, but just know that these cutscenes will play before starting the main shifts, and will play a direct role throughout this game's final boss. Look, I know we haven't dived into this game's main gameplay, but Jesus Christ, even if this is just only the cutscenes, I didn't even think Click Team could even handle N64 graphics, let alone in a 3D free roam aspect for this game. Like, that's not. I didn't even think that Click Team could even handle this much limitations. For FNAF fan game too. Enough praising that aspect though. After going through the cutscenes, here we finally get introduced to the main office segments. We get introduced to the three main resources for this game, those being the cameras, our laptop, and the conveyor belts. First we have the cameras, and here we can view all the places for our animatronics to be wandering around. Around a minute-ish mark is where the ghost will haunt and take control of an animatronic. It's where the 4 tactics to spot the ghost comes into play. Though it's not all tactics at once during a single shift, instead a single tactic will switch between the nights. The first night is all about the flickering camera lens. The next night is the handprints after a haunted animatronic leaves a cam. The third night is all about the cams moving on their own, and the fourth night is all about the lost connections that occurs on screen, and lastly the fifth night is all combined. And to go back with our laptop, it is used to check the stability level from the animatronics from time to time, because if one of them reaches too low, call them into the conveyor belt to give them a new shift so that their stability level can be reached to 100 again. Something to keep in mind is that in each shift, the amount of times you need to mark a haunted animatronic will increase throughout the nights, which makes this one of the few difficulties that this game really has to offer, at least for the main gameplay. After going through all of the 5 shifts, we finally reach the boss fight. But it will take place in a different location, in contrast to what we were used to before. But it's not different enough to the point where we don't even know what this location is, because as a matter of fact, it's pretty similar. We've actually seen this location before. It's literally the FNAF 2 building, what do you know? And now we enter the boss fight. Interestingly though, this boss fight is made into two parts. The first part is literally ripped out of FNAF 2 with you needing to wind the music box to keep the puppet at bay, putting on the mask when with her Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica come into your office, Foxy needing to be flashed a couple of times to make him go away, and BB stealing your sweet succulent AA batteries. Only difference with him is that you can actually prevent BB from entering your office by flashing him on the right vent camera he's on to make him go away. And the second part transitions with all the animatronics you were dealing with from the first phase, all now combined together as the Mangle. While the gameplay honestly just pulls off a flumpty night ordeal, where any of the cameras you have to find the ghost and hold a light on her. Yes, it's a girl and she actually has an official render, which honestly terrifies me so much. As well as being on the lookout for Mangle in front of the hallway that you will have to shine your flashlight towards so that she can roar and just go away. You will also need to be on the lookout for its owl that Mangle has that can peek on both of the vents, and when that happens, simply put on the mask. And we reached the end of the game. We brought the ghost to the Barrens, and just as it seems like she was going to put an end to Paul Bear, we barely made it to the Barrens just to put an end on her. And this is where the main game ends. For the main night, while I do respect its originality and it has a lot of potential, I don't really think it's executed very well here. And that's because I have two problems. One, I honestly didn't found this game to be that scary like the promotional material made it out to be. And I think it all comes to the fact that there isn't a lot of consequences with how you die in this game. You see, the only ways you can die is either letting one of the animatronic stability level to run out, marking the wrong animatronic from who the ghost is actually possessing, and calling it an animatronic that is haunted to the conveyor belt. And besides worrying about the running stability meters from the main cast, the game gives you a lot of time of looking for the haunted animatronic unless you mark the wrong one. Which leads to my second argument. Number 2. This game also isn't as fun to play, which wouldn't be noteworthy if it wasn't for the fact that everyone in this game works the exact same, except for BB, who doesn't show up on the camera at all. And the only way to know that the ghost is even haunting him is to look at your laptop to see his stability meter glitching out, making him the easiest character to mark in this whole game. And while we're on the topic of cameras, man, they didn't explain all of the ghost tactics, did they? They were right on the flickering camera lens and the handprints, but not the tactics where the ghost can move the cameras and causing the camera to lose connection. The last one especially makes me the most mad because it is not warned at all, whereas the tactic of cameras moving on their own was at least written down on the board on the top of the monitor. As far as the boss fight, starting with the first phase, seriously, they couldn't even try enough to make a distinct FNAF 2 gameplay that fixes the biggest issue that original game even had. This is a FNAF fan game they cooked. Shouldn't they at least try to make this segment a little bit more unique? Well, at least the second phase is a little better, but that's not to say it's that good either. An issue I had while playing this was finding the ghost on the cams taking too long for her to show up. I've had a lot of attempts where I would die from that stupid bit, and to make it even worse, and I don't know if this comes from the fact that my PC is just simply awful, but sometimes when I do see the ghost, flashing on her to make her go away would sometimes not work. I also don't like how when warning you about the Mangle through the text and all the things she can do, it doesn't tell you the mechanic of its owl peeking from both vents and putting your mask on to make him go away. It was janky to say the least. Lastly, the story did not engage with me at all. Which sucks because the story's main premise is pretty interesting actually, because it kind of interprets the concept of the ghost in control of Paul Bear to work for her in haunting juniors, kind of parallels with the fan theory of the crying child and Cassidy possessing Golden Freddy in one, and Cassidy being the one in control. It's pretty neat for a fan game to acknowledge. But I don't think this interpretation was done nor explored very well. I think the biggest problem I have with this game's story is the lack of information from our main characters. We don't know where they come from, nor we even know what their motivations are, especially with Paul Bear. And even worse, the logic behind this game makes no sense. I could just sit here and make fun of the fact that, provided from the stop motion tapes, only one ghost is doing all the work to create a hybrid, instead of multiple ghosts creating a hybrid, which I would have preferred better because that concept was actually explored in Scott Cawthon's SL, which had a much better narrative all around in that game. But then we cut back to our main character putting a stop to the ghost by unaliving her with a dagger. It's a ghost. If I was the main character in this situation, I probably would have sucked the life out of her with a vacuum. Whatever. So to answer the big question I asked myself at the beginning was, what makes Junior so divided? Well, from what I can tell, there are two sides to be discussed about. One side that agrees that they had a blast with Juniors all the way through because of its diversity and atmosphere, while the other side argued that they hated it, due to the game being very vague that doesn't explain to you what you need to do, and the story never being explored despite having a cool premise. For me, I think this game is the perfect example of a project with a lot of style with no substance. I do feel bad displaying my critiques still because I remember when this game was first teased and many people were hyped, myself included. A lot of us have held hope that this fan game wouldn't have any problems along with its development. But as we all know, that hope was severely backfired when the pair situation came out, and that the dev behind Juniors was one of them, was leaking not only FNAF fan games that haven't been officially released yet, but as well as extremely private stuff that I won't dive into much here just for the sake of respecting good people that might have been involved with the situation. It quickly made a lot of people lose interest and hope that Juniors would fail and become irrelevant, as well as having the other side of the fandom to not play Juniors because of the association with the dev. But hey, the game job page for Juniors is run by a different account just simply named the Juniors team in hopes that the new people that haven't heard of the name Rabinoff won't see the name show up anymore. And that was Juniors! This video took a while for me to make, and I wanted to create a video like this for so long, especially since I don't see a lot of prominent content creators, you know, in the FNAF fan base that have actually discussed about Juniors, which really surprises me. But hey, I hope this video can break the record for that, even though this is coming from someone that you've never even heard of until watching this video right now. Until the next video though, peace!